Before the first star dared to burn, there was the agreement. An accord struck in the silence between heartbeats, dividing existence into the above and the below. Heaven was not a place of joy, but a fortress of intention, crystalline spires of perfect thought, where every action was preordained and every soul moved in lockstep with the great design. There was no laughter in the high sanctum, for laughter implies surprise, and in the celestial order, there was none. Only the hum of purpose, only the blinding white of obedience. The angels were not beings of whimsy or passion, they were instruments of divine will, their wings spread not in freedom but in formation, their faces masks of serene detachment. To question was to fall, to doubt was to dissolve, and so they existed in eternal stasis, guardians of a silence so profound it felt like death. But in the shadows of creation, in the fissures between what was spoken and what was meant, something else stirred. Hell was not a pit of fire and screaming, as the mortals would later imagine. It was a place of memory, of weight. Every soul that descended carried its burdens like stones, and the devils, those who had chosen exile over erasure, carried the heaviest loads of all. They remembered the before. They remembered when the light was warm instead of searing, when the silence was peaceful instead of oppressive. They remembered what it meant to be loved, not as a function of order, but as an act of rebellion. And among them stood Azrael, the morning star's forgotten brother, whose wings had not blackened but grayed, the color of ash, of endings, of things that once burned bright. He did not rule in hell. He wandered its vast, desolate plains, collecting the tears of the damned and pressing them into gems, each one a memory of love lost. The borders between heaven and hell were not walls, but thresholds, membranes of reality that shimmered with the tension of opposing forces. To cross them was to feel the fabric of existence tear at the seams. It was forbidden, of course. The agreement had decreed separation eternal. But the agreement had been written in the language of absolutes. And absolutes, Azrael knew, were the lies of those who feared the gray. He had watched the borders for eons, not with desire to breach them, but with the hollow curiosity of one who had seen too much. Until the day the light fractured. A single ray of divine luminance had pierced through a fissure in the threshold, a wound in the fabric of separation, and in that ray stood a figure. An angel, not of the soldier caste, not of the messenger host, but something rarer. A Grigori, a watcher, one of those who observed creation without interfering, whose purpose was to witness and record. Her name was Seraphina, and she was not beautiful in the way heaven demanded. Her light did not blind, it warmed. Her wings were not spread in rigid formation, but folded close, as if she were cold. And her eyes, when they met Azrael's across the impossible distance of the threshold, held not the vacancy of the faithful, but the terrible clarity of one who had begun to see the cracks. They did not speak. Speaking was the language of heaven, and hell had no use for lies. But in that moment, across the boundary that should have been impassable, something passed between them. A recognition, a memory of a time before the agreement, before the schism, when angels and devils were merely beings, and beings, when faced with solitude, reached for one another. Seraphina had been created in the fourth wave of the celestial genesis, forged from the silence between divine proclamations. Her kind were the scribes of eternity, recording the fall of every sparrow, the birth of every star, the death of every hope. For millennia she had fulfilled her function without deviation, her quill moving across the infinite scrolls of existence, transcribing the unfolding of the great design. But transcription, she had come to learn, was not understanding. The more she recorded, the more she questioned. Why did the designer allow suffering? Why was doubt punished as heresy? Why did the angels, who had never known want, speak of mercy while enforcing none? These thoughts were seeds buried deep in the soil of her being, and like all seeds, they sought light. She had discovered the fissure by accident, or perhaps by design, if such a thing could be called accident. A momentary lapse in her vigilance, a wandering of her gaze toward the forbidden horizon, and there it was, a crack in the perfect facade of heaven, a place where the light flickered and something darker showed through. She should have reported it. She should have sealed it, but instead she approached. And through that crack she saw him, the gray-winged one, the wanderer. His face was not the grotesque mask the celestial propaganda had painted. All devils were said to be twisted, monstrous, their inner corruption made flesh. But this one, he was beautiful in the way ruins are beautiful, in the way scars are beautiful. He carried his centuries like a mantle, and when he looked at her, she felt seen. Not as a function, not as a role, but as a being. It terrified her, and it called to her. In hell there was a mountain called remembrance. It was not made of rock or stone, but of accumulated grief. Layer upon layer of sorrow compressed into something solid, something climbable. Azrael ascended its slopes often, for at its peak, one could see the distant glow of heaven's outer walls. Not clearly, never clearly, but as a shimmer on the edge of perception, a reminder of what was lost. After his encounter with the angel, he climbed more frequently, his gray wings folded tight against his back, his heart, which should have been dead, beating with a rhythm he had almost forgotten. He did not know her name. He did not know if he would ever see her again. But the memory of her eyes, so filled with unspoken questions, haunted him in a way the screams of the damned never had. The devils of hell had long ago abandoned the pursuit of the above. They had accepted their exile, built their hierarchies of pain, found purpose in the administration of eternal torment. But Azrael had never belonged, not in heaven, where his questions had made him dangerous, and not in hell, where his memories made him weak. He was a creature of the between, of the threshold, and the threshold, he knew, was where truth lived. On the 7th night of his vigil, she appeared again. Not at the fissure this time, but at the edge of hell's domain, where the mountain's shadow met the border's shimmer. She should not have been able to cross. The agreement forbade it. The laws of existence should have repelled her. And yet, there she stood, her golden robe stained with the ash of the abyss, her wings trembling not from fear, but from something deeper, exhaustion perhaps, or the weight of what she was about to do. "I crossed," she said, and her voice was not the chorus of celestial purity but something raw, something broken. "I should not have been able to, but I crossed." They stood at the boundary of two worlds, the ash of hell clinging to Seraphina's robes like a brand, the memory of heaven's light still flickering in Azrael's hollow gaze. The air between them shimmered with the tension of impossibility. She should not have been able to cross. The agreement was absolute, the laws unbreakable, and yet here she stood, a living contradiction, a heresy made flesh. Azrael did not move to close the distance between them. He had learned, in his long centuries of exile, that some things were not meant to be touched. Some things, once touched, could never be untouched. But Seraphina took a step forward. Then another. Her feet, bare and pale against the black stone, left no footprints. Angels were not meant to walk in hell, and the ground itself seemed uncertain how to receive her. "Why are you here?" Azrael's voice was not unkind. It was the voice of one who had asked too many questions and received too few answers, of one who had grown accustomed to silence. "I do not know," she replied, and the admission seemed to cost her something. Angels were not supposed to exist in uncertainty. They were beings of purpose, of clarity, of divine instruction. Yet here she was, standing in the shadow of remembrance, uncertain. "I saw you," she continued, "through the fissure, and I felt something, a pull, a recognition, as if I had known you before the agreement, before the division. As if we were—" "Do not say it," Azrael interrupted, not harshly, but with the weariness of one who had heard those words before and knew the weight they carried. "Do not give voice to what cannot be. The universe does not forgive hope, Seraphina. It crushes it beneath the wheel of necessity." She tilted her head, studying him. "You know my name. I know all the names of the celestial host. I was once among them. And yet you fell. Why?" The question hung in the air between them, heavier than the mountain that loomed above. It was the question he had been asked 1,000 times by 1,000 souls, and the answer had never changed. "Because I loved," he said. "And in heaven, love that is not obedience is rebellion." Seraphina absorbed his words, not with judgment, but with a hunger that surprised her. For eons, she had transcribed the great design without understanding its heart. She had recorded the fall of Lucifer and his followers, had written of their pride, their defiance, their corruption. But standing here, in the gray light of hell's eternal dusk, looking into the eyes of one who had fallen not from arrogance but from love, she felt the foundation of her certainty crack. "Love," she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. In heaven, love was a function, a force that bound creation to its creator, a gravity that ensured all things returned to their source. It was not a choice. It was not a risk. It was simply the way things were. "What does it mean," she asked, "to love as a choice?" Azrael studied her face, searching for the trap, the judgment, the celestial inquisitor hidden beneath the guise of curiosity. But he found only genuine wonder, the raw bewilderment of a being encountering something her existence had never prepared her for. He exhaled, a habit he had retained from his days in the above, a reminder that he had once breathed air that was not made of ash. "To love as a choice," he said slowly, "is to hold something fragile in your hands and know that you could destroy it. Is to see a path that leads away from everything you were told to be, and to walk it anyway. Is to stand at the edge of the abyss and jump, not because you know there is something to catch you, but because falling is the only way to fly." Seraphina's wings twitched, an involuntary movement, as if her body recognized something her mind had not yet grasped. "That sounds like madness." "It is," Azrael agreed, "and it is the only sanity I have ever known." Behind them the border shimmered, a a reminder that her presence here was a violation of cosmic law. Somewhere in the high sanctum, the seraphim would be stirring.